The night Felicity Odom got engaged, the rooftop of the Hargrove Grand smelled like champagne and cruelty. Ivy Malone noticed both the moment she stepped off the elevator. She hadn't wanted to come. She told her manager, Dana Chu, 3 times over email, that she didn't need to attend Whitmore & Lane's annual client gala to do her job. She could run the firm's entire analytics division from a laptop and a strong Wi-Fi connection. Dana had replied each time with a single line, "Your bonus depends on visibility, Ivy. Show up." So Ivy had showed up. She wore the navy dress her mother had mailed from Cincinnati, the one with the cap sleeves that were slightly too short for her arms, and the zipper that required a prayer and 2 good angles to close. She'd done her hair. She'd put on lipstick the color of a bruised plum. She'd taken a cab instead of the subway so she'd arrive without sweat stains. None of it mattered the moment she walked in, because this was exactly the kind of room that decided what you were worth before you opened your mouth. Whitmore & Lane's biggest clients were all here. Tech founders in their 30s with the careful stubble of men who had never once needed to try. Heiresses in slip dresses that cost more than Ivy's monthly rent. Board members with silver hair and the patient eyes of people who had been powerful so long they'd forgotten what it felt like to ask for anything. They floated between the cocktail tables with the ease of creatures in their natural habitat. Ivy was not in her natural habitat. She was standing near the shrimp cocktail, holding a glass of sparkling water, trying to calculate whether she could make a believable exit in 40 minutes. The Malone from analytics. She turned. A man she didn't recognize was looking at her. Not past her, not through her, but directly at her, with the focused attention of someone who had already decided she was interesting. He was tall. Dark suit, no tie, the collar of his shirt open 1 button too many for a room this formal. There was a quality to his stillness that made Ivy think of a chess player 3 moves ahead. "Deepens," she said. "Who's asking?" The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. "Cormac Vane mentioned you. He said you were the only person at this firm who actually understood the Kellerman risk model." Ivy blinked. The Kellerman model was a 12-variable predictive framework she'd rebuilt from scratch 8 months ago, after the original analyst had left it full of circular references and wishful thinking. Almost no one at the firm had read it. Cormac Vane, senior partner 3rd floor, the kind of Mansiksen who spoke in full sentences only when absolutely necessary, had apparently not only read it, but talked about it. "I understood it because I wrote it," she said. Something shifted in the man's expression. Rowan Ashby. The name landed in Ivy's chest like a stone into still water, the ripples moving outward in slow recognition. Rowan Ashby. She'd seen his name in the financial news enough times to have a folder on her desktop. Ashby Capital. Rowan Ashby acquires majority stake. Rowan Ashby named to Forbes list for 3rd consecutive year. He was 38 years old and he owned controlling interests in 6 companies, 2 of which Whitmore & Lane managed portfolios for. He was, by any reasonable measure, the most important person in this room. He was also, apparently, shaking her hand. "Ivy Malone," she said, and shook it. Before he could say anything else, there was a sound from across the rooftop, the high, percussive ring of a fork against crystal, and the crowd shifted toward the center of the space, where a makeshift stage had been arranged near the bar. Ivy shifted with them, losing Rowan Ashby in the movement, and found herself standing in the 3rd ring of onlookers watching a man she recognized as Garrett Pell. Junior partner, expensive haircut, the specific confidence of someone who'd never been told no in a professional setting, climbed 2 steps to the microphone. Garrett adjusted his cufflinks. He smiled at the crowd the way people smile when they already know what the applause will sound like. "I'll keep this short," he said. "I promise." Polite laughter. He didn't keep anything short. 7 years ago, I started at this firm as an associate. I had a desk by the copy room and a coffee maker that only worked if you hit it on the left side. More laughter, warmer now. He was good at this. But somewhere along the way, I also found something a lot more important. He held out his hand, and a woman walked up the steps to take it. Ivy recognized her too. Felicity Odom, head of client relations, Ivy's direct counterpart for external accounts. The woman who'd once forwarded Ivy's report to a client with her own name at the top of it, and never mentioned it again. Felicity was wearing a white dress that seemed to have been designed specifically for this moment, and she was smiling with every muscle in her face. Garrett produced a ring box. The crowd made a sound. "Felicity," he said into the microphone, "you are everything. The answer is yes, right?" Felicity laughed, a practiced, luminous laugh, and said yes, and the crowd erupted, and someone popped a bottle of something expensive, and the foam caught the rooftop lights and scattered them like confetti. In the chaos of congratulations, Ivy felt someone appear at her shoulder. "You look like you're calculating the structural load of the moment," said a low voice. She turned. Rowan Ashby had found her again. "I was actually calculating my exit," she said. Bad habit. Leaving early. Bad habit. Staying places you don't want to be. He considered that. Around them, the engagement celebration was in full swing. Felicity holding her hand out for inspection, Garrett accepting claps on the back, with the satisfied ease of a man who had just checked the most important box on his list. Dana Chu was somewhere in the crowd, probably taking mental notes on who was networking with whom. "The Kellerman model," Rowan said, "the section on tail risk. You weighted the illiquidity premium differently than the standard Damodaran approach." Ivy looked at him. "You actually read it." 3 times. She felt something strange happen in her chest. It was the particular warmth of being seen by someone who had been looking for exactly the right thing, and found it where no one else had thought to look. She pushed it down. "The standard approach underweights liquidity stress in mid-cap positions," she said, keeping her voice even. "Damodaran's framework was built for large caps in normal market conditions. I adjusted for the Kellerman portfolio's specific concentration risk." "I know," Rowan said. Ivy stared at him. "You came to this gala to talk to me about a risk model." "I came to this gala," he said, "because Whitmore and Lane invited me, and because Cormac Vane told me there was someone in the analytics division worth talking to." He paused. He was understating it. Ivy opened her mouth, closed it. Somewhere behind her, Felicity Odom's laugh rose above the crowd again like a very pretty alarm. "You should know," Ivy said carefully, "that I'm not a junior associate you can poach with flattery." "I know that too," Rowan said. "I'm not offering flattery." "What are you offering?" He reached into his jacket and produced a card. Not a business card, a heavier stock, no logo, just a number handwritten in the center. "Have dinner with me. I want to talk about rebuilding my risk assessment framework from the ground up. And I want the person who built the Kellerman model to tell me why everything my current team is doing is wrong." Ivy looked at the card. She looked at him. "That's an unusual pitch," she said. "You're an unusual person," he said. "I've been told I match my energy to the room." She took the card. She was going to say she needed to think about it. She was going to say she'd check her calendar, consult her professional instincts, maybe send Dana a carefully worded email asking if there were conflict of interest implications in accepting dinner from a current firm client. She said, "Next Thursday works." The dinner was at a restaurant Ivy had heard of but never been to. The kind of place where the menu had no prices and the reservation waitlist was measured in months. She spent the cab ride overrunning a mental risk analysis on herself. Probability, this is a mistake. Probability, he's like every other man who remembers your name only until something more impressive walks in. Probability, you've misread the entire interaction. Rowan was already at the table when she arrived, and he stood when he saw her, which was a small thing that cost him nothing, but made her recalibrate everything. They talked for 4 hours. Not about the risk framework, at least not only about that. They talked about the mechanics of bad decisions, about how most financial crises were just human psychology at scale, about a paper Ivy had been writing in her evenings about behavioral economics in illiquid markets. Rowan had read 2 of the papers she'd cited. He disagreed with one of her conclusions and said so directly, without apology, and she pushed back, and they argued pleasantly about it until the restaurant was nearly empty, and the waiter was making increasingly visible gestures toward the door. On the sidewalk after, Rowan looked at her for a long moment. "Second dinner," he said. "You pick." She picked a Vietnamese place in Midtown that had the best pho in the city and the kind of lighting that discouraged anyone from performing a version of themselves. They went 3 days later, then again the following week. The fourth dinner was at his penthouse because he wanted to show her the risk assessment framework his team had built, which turned out to be exactly as problematic as she'd suspected, and they ended up at his kitchen table with her laptop and 3 hours of annotated spreadsheets from a Thai place that delivered until midnight. At 11:47, he said, "Ivy." She looked up from the laptop. "I should tell you something," he said. She waited. "I've been looking for a reason to not do this," he said, "and I can't find one." She understood what he meant. She wished she didn't, because understanding it meant she had to decide what to do with it, and she had spent enough of her life being the person who made the sensible choice at the expense of everything else. "Rowan," she said. "I know," he said. "I know all the reasons. I work for a firm that manages 2 of your portfolio companies. I know." "This is professionally?" "I know," he said again, quieter. "I've been sitting here for 4 dinners knowing, Ivy. I'm not asking you to be reckless. I'm asking you to tell me, honestly, whether you want to walk out that door or not." She looked at him across the takeout containers and the annotated spreadsheets and the city spread out behind him through the penthouse windows, 52 floors up, the whole of Manhattan laid out like a circuit board still running. "I don't want to walk out the door," she said. His exhale was the kind that meant he'd been holding something in for a long time. What followed was not a fairy tale. Ivy had read enough fairy tales to know the difference. Fairy tales were about transformation, the plain girl who became beautiful, the poor girl who became rich. What happened between Ivy and Rowan was not transformation. It was recognition. He didn't change the way she saw herself. He confirmed what she'd spent years suspecting was true, that she was exactly enough, exactly as she was, and anyone who'd told her otherwise had simply lacked the discernment to see it. She told no one. She wasn't ashamed of it. She simply didn't have the vocabulary for it yet, and she didn't want to perform something she was still quietly living inside of. 2 months in, Felicity Odom found out. Ivy wasn't sure exactly how. Felicity had always possessed a particular talent for professional intelligence. She knew things before they were announced, sensed structural changes in the air like a barometric shift. It might have been that she'd seen Rowan's car outside Ivy's building. It might have been that someone at a client dinner had mentioned seeing them together. It might have been nothing more than the small but unmistakable change in the way Ivy had been moving through the office. Not louder, not bolder, just settled, the way a person moves when they've stopped bracing for something. Whatever the source, Felicity materialized at Ivy's desk on a Tuesday afternoon with the serene efficiency of a woman who enjoyed delivering news that would rearrange things. "I just want you to be careful," Felicity said, perching on the edge of the desk in a way that said, "I own this space and everything in it. Rowan Ashby is not someone who, he's wonderful, obviously, but men like that aren't looking for." She paused, smiled. "Let the pause do the work. I just care about you, Ivy. You know that." Ivy looked at her. "Thank you," she said. "I'll keep that in mind." After Felicity left, Dana Chu appeared in the doorway of her office. Dana had a particular expression reserved for situations she found interesting. Not quite concern, not quite amusement, something in the efficient middle. "Felicity just had a very pointed conversation with 3 people, Dana said. "You should know." "I know," Ivy said. "The board meets next week. I don't know if there's a conflict of interest angle being floated, but I know," Ivy said again. "I'm already handling it." She had been handling it for 6 weeks. She'd quietly consulted the firm's ethics policy. She'd drafted a disclosure memo. She'd had a conversation with Cormac Vane that had lasted 11 minutes and ended with him saying, in the specific cadence of someone who wanted the record to reflect their support, "The firm's interest in maintaining this relationship is significant, and the analytics division's role in that relationship has always been handled with exceptional integrity. Don't blow this up, and you're fine. The board meeting was on a Wednesday. Ivy presented the Ashby Capital Risk Framework she'd spent 6 weeks building, the replacement for the one that had already been quietly, structurally wrong in 3 different ways. She walked through her methodology with the clean efficiency of someone who had done this in her head so many times that the presentation was almost boring. When she finished, there was a silence of the particular quality that meant people were recalibrating. Garrett Pell cleared his throat from the far end of the table. The Ashby relationship has always been managed at the senior partner level, he said. It's not typical for an analytics lead to be presenting directly. Rowan Ashby requested it, Cormac Vane said, without looking up from his folder, and that was the end of that. After the meeting, she took the elevator down to the lobby and walked out into the March air, which was cold and bright, and smelled like the city finally deciding to wake up. Her phone buzzed. "How'd it go, Rowan?" She typed back. "You already know how it went." His reply, "I wanted to hear it from you." She stood on the sidewalk and smiled at her phone like an idiot, which was new. She'd spent a long time being the person who did not smile at phones on sidewalks. She'd considered it a point of personal dignity. She was revising her position. The thing about Felicity Odom and Garrett Pell, Ivy had come to understand, was that they were not villains in the operatic sense. They were something more mundane and more common, people who had built their self-worth on a narrow definition of what mattered, and who became quietly dangerous when that definition was challenged. Felicity had decided, at some point in her career, that Ivy Malone was a supporting character in a story Felicity was the center of. Garrett had decided the same thing about most people he'd ever met. What neither of them had accounted for was the possibility that Rowan Ashby had his own story, and that he'd decided Ivy was in it. The restructuring announcement came on a Friday in April. Whitmore & Lane was merging its risk analytics function with a newly formed Ashby Capital Advisory Division, a move that would fold the department's work directly into Rowan's portfolio strategy, with Ivy named as Director of Quantitative Strategy, a title that had not previously existed and had been, to be accurate, constructed specifically for this moment and this person. Garrett Pell, who had spent 6 months positioning himself as the natural relationship lead for the Ashby account, was assigned to a different portfolio division, a lateral move, technically. The sort of lateral move that felt, from the inside, like falling. Felicity's project, a client entertainment initiative she'd been building for 2 quarters, lost its primary funding source when Rowan reallocated the budget to quantitative infrastructure. He did it without drama, via a single line in an asset allocation document, the way he did most things, precisely without announcement, with the patience of someone who had learned long ago that the move matters more than the noise around it. Ivy watched it all from a remove that felt almost academic. She sat across from Rowan on a Sunday in May, in the apartment she still kept in the West Village because she'd decided she wasn't ready to stop being a person who had her own apartment. And she said, "You didn't have to do any of that." He looked at her. "Which part? The restructuring, the Garrett situation, the Felicity budget thing." "The restructuring was a sound business decision," he said. "I've wanted to build that advisory function for 2 years. You made it viable." He paused. "The rest of it." He turned his coffee cup in his hands. "I didn't like watching people diminish you in spaces you'd built. That's honest. That's somewhat terrifying," she said. "I know, Rowan. I know you don't need it," he said, with a steadiness that was by now familiar to her. The specific tone of a man who had decided something and was not performing the decision, only living it. "That's not why I did it." She looked at him for a long time. "Why did you do it?" she asked. "Because you were the most capable person in every room you walked into," he said, "and you'd been trained to apologize for it." "I didn't fix that. You were already in the process of fixing it. I just removed the obstacles." She should have had something sharp to say to that. She usually did. She said instead, "Okay," he blinked. Okay, I'm accepting the thing you said. I'm not going to argue with it. She set her coffee down. I'm trying something new. The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile, the same expression she'd catalogued from the rooftop of the Hargrove Grand, 10 months and what felt like several lives ago. How's that going? Terrifying, she said. But I've decided terrifying is probably just what it feels like when something is the right size for your actual life instead of the smaller one you'd been living. He reached across the table and took her hand. Not dramatically, not as punctuation to a speech, just the way you take someone's hand when you've been wanting to for a while and you've run out of reasons not to. Outside, New York was doing what New York did in May, the full, relentless, slightly aggressive bloom of a city that didn't know how to be subtle about anything. The windows were open, the air smelled like coffee and cut grass and bus exhaust and the specific mineral scent of the river, if you were high enough and the wind was right. Ivy Malone, who had once stood near a shrimp cocktail calculating whether she could make a believable exit, who had spent the better part of her career being the smartest person in rooms that refused to acknowledge it, who had worn a navy dress with slightly too short sleeves and put on plum-colored lipstick and shown up anyway. Ivy Malone did not make an exit. She stayed, and for the first time in a very long time, she didn't calculate the risk of that at all.